The wind on Caro 7 did not howl. It scoured. It was a high, thin sound, the noise of fine grit sand stripping oxidized iron from the bones of forgotten machinery. The moon was a graveyard, a failed mining colony that had become a failed battlefield. And now it was just a forgotten rock where men like Rex Varn came to disappear. Commander Rex Varn. The title was a joke, a ghost that followed him from a life that had burned down to the bulkheads. He was just Rex now, a man with a tremor in his right hand and too many faces behind his eyes. He was moving through the ruins of the Aegis diplomatic fortress, a place that had been built with 10-meter-thick marble and shatterproof optimism. Both had proven insufficient. Now it was just a ribcage of twisted plasteel and powdered duracrete. He kept his kinetic rifle slung low, its weight a familiar comfort. He was here for salvage, he told himself, parts for his ship, fuel cells. Anything the Venari patrols or the Earth Core scavengers had missed. It was a lie. He was here because the silence of his freighter, the Nomad's luck, had become too loud. He was picking through the remains of what looked like a negotiation hall when he heard it. It was not the wind. It was not the shriek of metal settling. It was a whimper. The tremor in his hand flared. His breath hitched. The ghosts were back. The voices of his squad on Cygnus, the sounds they made when the plasma charges cooked the air in the bunker. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing the memory down. The ghosts were never real, but the sound came again. He moved toward it, rifle up, his heavy boot cracking a sheet of mirrored glass that had once reflected the two suns of this system. He kicked at a slab of plasteel, then another. The sound was coming from beneath a massive block of synthetic granite, the kind they used for monuments. It was wedged at an angle, creating a small, dark void. He knelt, the joints of his scarred armor groaning. He activated the floodlight on his helmet. The beam cut the darkness, and he saw a hand. It was small, caked in white dust, and it was not human. The skin was a pale, dusty lavender, the fingers thin. Rex's blood ran cold. He grabbed the edge of the granite slab. The thing must have weighed 2 tons, but adrenaline was a potent fuel. He set his feet, drawing a breath that tore at his throat, and heaved. The slab shifted, scraping, and then toppled over with a crash that echoed through the ruins. There, in the shallow depression, lay a child, a girl, maybe 8 years old, 9 at the most. She was wearing the tattered remains of a silk tunic, a garment that had no place on a battlefield. Her hair was a shock of silver, plastered to her skull with dust and dark, dried blood. She was half buried, one leg trapped at an unnatural angle. She was dying. He reached for his medkit, then stopped. His hand hovered. The girl was an alien, a Venari, or something close to it. He saw the slight, elegant point of her ears, a bounty. The Earth Venari Accords were clear. Any undocumented alien life found in contested sectors was to be terminated or turned over, especially offspring. The Venari were purists. They executed hybrids on site as genetic pollution. Earth's Shadow Core was less ideological. They just paid 1 million credits for them, dead or alive, to be dissected in labs on Titan. This was his ticket off this rock. 1 million credits. He could get his neural dampener fixed, stop the shaking. He could buy a new life, somewhere the ghosts could not find him. All he had to do was leave her, or put a single merciful bolt into her skull. He watched, his heart a cold stone in his chest. The girl's eyes fluttered, her lips, cracked and blue, parted. A whisper escaped. Rex leaned closer. His helmet translator was always active, a habit from the war. The girl spoke, her voice a dry rustle. The words were slurred, broken by pain, but the translator lit up in his ocular display. Cold, it burns. The language was Vonari, but the display flagged the dialect with a flashing amber icon. Imperial. High Court. Rare. Rex's breath caught in his throat. He had heard that dialect only once before, a lifetime ago, from the only Vonari who had ever dared to speak it to a human. The girl's eyes, clouded with shock, found him. "Mother," she whispered, and then her eyes rolled back. He stood frozen. The word echoed in the ruins, mixing with the ghosts. "Mother." The shaking in his hand was so bad he could barely unlatch his medkit. He cursed the moon, the war, the girl, and himself. He cursed the face that had just flashed in his memory, the face of a princess with eyes like violet nebulae. "Damn it," he snarled, the word ripped from him. "Damn it all." He pulled out a high-dose coagulant patch and slapped it onto the gash on her temple. He injected her with a broad-spectrum stimulant, just enough to keep her heart from stopping. He worked with a grim, practiced efficiency, his movements sure despite the tremor. He snapped a lightweight splint around her leg, ignoring the faint moan of pain. He did not let himself think. Thinking was the enemy. Thinking was what got you killed or worse. What made you live with what you had done. He wrapped the child in his own thermal cloak. She weighed almost nothing. As he lifted her, the silver hair fell away from her face. He saw her features clearly for the first time. The pointed ears and silver hair were Vonari, but the high bridge of her nose, the shape of her jaw, it was human. A hybrid. The bounty hunters would kill for her. The politicians would start another war over her. He should have left her. He knew it. This was not a child. This was a bomb. This was the end of his quiet, miserable life. He turned from the ruins and began the 2-click trek back to his ship. The girl a feather-light weight in his arms. He had not thought of Alira Vaughn in 10 years. Not really. He had buried her, along with his old uniform, his medals, and the man he used to be. But the girl's voice, the imperial dialect, had excavated the memory. He saw her, Princess Alira Vaughn, heir to the Obsidian throne, daughter of the Twin Stars, 10 years ago. He was Commander Rex Vaughn of the Earth Diplomatic Corps, a military emissary to the Vonari Empire. It was the last breath of peace, the fragile calm before the great burning. He was stationed on the Lyra moon base, a glittering marvel of glass and steel in neutral territory, a monument to a peace that neither side truly wanted. He saw her first across the polished obsidian of the treaty table. She was a vision of silver and violet. Her skin was the color of a polished blade, her hair a cascade of white silver. She was a royal, flanked by grim-faced Vonari generals in their crimson armor. She wore the heavy robes of her station, but she wore them like a cage. He was just a human, a guard dog in a dress uniform. But their eyes had met. He saw, beneath the regal ice, a boredom that matched his own. A fire. Their first real conversation was a violation of a dozen protocols. It was in the hydroponic gardens, under a canopy of glowing earth flora. She had slipped her guards. He was on an unauthorized break. She spoke perfect, unaccented English. The Vordani methane breathers will never agree to the tariffs. Commander, your admiral is wasting his breath. He had been stunned. He's following the script. Princess. The script is boring, she'd replied, her violet eyes studying him. And it was written by fools. You are not a fool, are you? Rex Vaughn? She knew his name. It started there. Stolen conversations about policy, philosophy, the stars. He learned that her regal coldness was a mask, a shield against a court that saw her as a political asset. She learned that his military discipline was a wall against a past he wanted to forget. The talks became arguments. The arguments became confessions. The confessions became something else. It was in his quarters. The sensors jammed with a low-level frequency. The first time he touched her, her silver skin had been warm, electric. It was taboo. It was treason. It was the only real thing that had happened to him in a decade. She was fierce, passionate, and terrified of the cage her father, the Emperor, was building for her. He remembered the night under the artificial starlight of the observation dome. She had been quiet, tracing the scars on his chest. "My father has arranged a match," she said, her voice flat. "General Korath, a hero of the Outer Rim, a brute with a tactical mind." He had felt the blood drain from his face. "Elira, he will secure the loyalty of the warrior caste. It is a good move, politically." "To hell with politics," Rex had growled, pulling her close. She had looked up at him, her violet eyes burning with a desperate, impossible light. "Mark me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Put your mark on me. Rex, here." She touched the hollow of her collarbone. "Give me a scar that he cannot see, so I know that one part of me is still yours." He had kissed her. He had marked her. It was a promise, a brand, a foolish human act of possession. A week later, he was reassigned, stripped of his diplomatic status and thrown back to the front lines. He thought she had betrayed him. He thought her father had found out, and this was his punishment. He sent a dozen messages. None were answered. Then the war broke out. The Earth-Vanari Peace Summit on Vonar Prime was the flashpoint. A human extremist group named Terra Pura was blamed for the bombing. A Vanari splinter cell was also blamed. The truth, as always, was buried in the rubble. The bomb had detonated in the royal wing. Elira's new husband, General Korath, was incinerated. Her father, the Emperor, was incinerated. Her entire line, gone. The news reports showed Elira standing on the steps of her burning palace. She was scarred, her left arm replaced with gleaming Vanari cybernetics. But she was alive. She had survived, and the ice in her eyes was no longer a mask. It was real. Rex was on the front lines when he saw that broadcast. The man he had been, the emissary who believed in peace, died on that day. He became a soldier, and he fought. He never knew about the child. Elira had hidden the pregnancy. A hybrid was a death sentence for her, for the child, for any hope of stability. It was the one secret she kept from everyone. When she was sent to the fortress on Caros 7 for the final doomed diplomatic talks, a fortress named Aegis in a cruel twist of fate, she brought her daughter. She'd given birth in secret, attended by a single loyal medical droid. She thought the neutral ground, the diplomatic immunity, would keep the child safe while she navigated the political disaster of her marriage and the impending war. She was wrong. The fortress was the first target. When the bombs fell, Elira was pulled from the wreckage, but her daughter was lost. The wing of the fortress where the child was hidden had collapsed, vanished. The Vanari declared her dead, consumed by the flames, another casualty of human aggression. Rex knew none of this. He only knew that the small, impossible child in his arms was a link to a woman he thought was long dead to him. A princess who was now a reclusive, hardened empress. The nomad's luck was a piece of junk, but she was his, a Vindicator-class light freighter. Her hull plated with so many mismatched panels she looked like a patchwork quilt, but her engines were clean, and her signature was scrambled. He laid the girl on the co-pilot's bunk, a web of cracked synth leather. He strapped her in loosely. He powered the ship, the fusion core humming to life with a familiar, comforting vibration. The moon's automated defense grid was still active, a skeletal remainder of the war. Rex bypassed the standard flight plan protocols. He patched into a different network, a shadow frequency used by smugglers and deserters. He pulsed a signal, a string of encrypted data. Cargo 77, Red Alpha, volatile ore, priority clearance, no scans. It was an old code, a gamble. He did not know if anyone still monitored it. His screen flashed green. Clearance granted, 9-minute window. Acknowledgement. Rex did not acknowledge. He slammed his fist onto the thruster controls. The Nomad's luck leaped from the dust, the inertial dampeners groaning in protest. He kept the G-force low, his eyes glancing at the girl. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow. He cleared the thin atmosphere in 40 seconds, the ship rattling like a handful of bolts. The black of space opened up, beautiful and terrifying. He pushed the ship toward the jump point, his hands flying over the console. He did not see the two shimmering distortions that detached from the dark side of Caro 7. One was a Venari Inquisitor's ship, a bloodhunter scout, all black blades and silent running. It tasted the unique ion trail of his engines, logged the Venari DNA on board, and relayed the data. The other was smaller, faster, an Earth Shadow Core probe. It had been watching the fortress for weeks, a silent spider. It had seen him enter. It had seen him leave, carrying a package. It painted his hull with a microscopic tag and sent a single, encrypted burst toward Titan. Rex hit the jump coordinates. He engaged the driver. The stars elongated, turned to streaks of blue and white, and then the universe collapsed into the gray, silent non-space of the slipstream. He was clear. He was safe. He was wrong. For 3 hours, the ship was quiet. The only sound was the thrum of the engine, a low pulse in the dark. Rex let the autopilot hold its course. He sat in the pilot's chair, the kinetic rifle across his lap, and watched the gray void slide past. He had not slept in 2 days. The adrenaline was gone, leaving the bone-deep weariness and the shaking. He needed to clean the girl's wounds properly. He needed to figure out what to do. He could still sell her. Take her to the outlaw station at Tartarus, the highest bidder, no questions asked. He could take her to Earth, turn her over to the Corps. They might even pardon him, clear his deserter status. He could take her to Vonner, a peace offering to the Empress. I found this. Is she yours? He snorted. Alira would have him vaporized before he got within a light year of her. She would see it as a threat, an insult, a ghost from a life she had burned away. He stood, his joints cracking. He moved to the bunk. The girl was so still. Her lavender skin was pale, almost gray. The coagulant patch was holding, but she was cold. He unhooked the ship's medical scanner, a clunky, military surplus model, and ran it over her. The readout was a string of errors. DNA profile corrupted, inconclusive. Human 49%, Venari 49%, unknown 2%, 2%. What was 2%? He ran the scan again. Same result. He put the scanner away. This was above his pay grade. He sat on the floor, his back against the bulkhead, his rifle in his lap. He would rest his eyes. Just for a minute. He woke up with a jolt. The ship was silent. The engine hum was steady. His heart was hammering. He had not had a nightmare. He looked down. The girl had unstrapped herself from the bunk. She had crawled, or fallen, to the floor. She was curled up against his thigh, her small body pressed against the hard plasteel of his leg armor. Her silver head rested on his knee. She was asleep. He looked at her, this impossible child, this million-credit bounty, this walking declaration of war. She stirred, her face scrunching up in a dream. She nuzzled closer to his leg, seeking warmth. She muttered a single word. It was not Venari. It was not an imperial dialect. It was English. Safe. Rex Varn stopped breathing, the shaking in his hand, the constant humiliating tremor that had defined his life for 6 years, suddenly stopped. He looked at the child, her features a strange, beautiful, and terrifying mix of two worlds, a mix of his world and her world. He saw Illyra's silver hair. He saw the proud, sharp line of her jaw. And then he saw, for the first time, the faint spray of freckles across her nose, a human trait. He remembered their last night, the argument in the hydroponic garden. Illyra, desperate and angry, her voice breaking. What if I gave you something that was part of me and part of you? Would you still leave? He had thought it was a metaphor. He had thought it was a test. He slowly, so slowly, raised his trembling hand. He hesitated, then put it gently on the girl's silver hair. It was softer than he expected. The bounty was gone. The pardon was gone. The ghosts in his head were silent, pushed back by a new, terrifying and fiercely protective reality. This was not a mission. This was not salvage. He did not know what it was. But it was his. The obsidian palace on Vonner Prime did not have rooms. It had chambers, halls, and sanctums, carved from the living volcanic rock of the planet's heart. It was a fortress of breathtaking beauty and absolute paranoia. Its mistress, Empress Illyra Vaughn, had not stepped outside its black gates in 3 standard years. Illyra stood before a sheet of smart glass that mimicked a night sky she could no longer visit. She was dressed in the heavy, high-collared mourning robes of her station, the black silk interwoven with silver threads that formed subtle energy-dampening circuits. They protected her from assassins. They also made her a prisoner. Her reflection stared back, the silver skin, the violet eyes. The Vonari half of her was flawless, regal. The other half, her left side, was a testament to the war. From the shoulder down, her arm was a gleaming construct of Vonari cybernetics, polished black metal and glowing purple conduits. Her face, too, bore the memory of the bomb, a network of fine, silvery scars, like a spider's web, climbed from her jaw to her temple, just missing her eye. They had offered to erase them. She had refused. They were her crown, a chime, soft as a breath, broke the silence. It was not the official court chime. It was a shadow signal, a ghost in her private network. She turned, her personal console, a slab of floating crystal lit up. A single encrypted data packet sat waiting. It was from her last loyalist, her old spy master, Xylus, a man she had supposedly exiled but who now operated deep in the shadows of the Earth-controlled sectors. She placed her cybernetic hand on the console. The crystal scanned her metallic fingers, bypassed 5 layers of security and opened the file. It was a report, 3 lines of text. Caro 7, Bloodhunter Patrol, positive DNA trace, target, unidentified Vonari child, accompanied by human male, ex-military, C-class freighter. Illyra's breath caught. She leaned closer, her organic hand gripping the edge of the crystal. The data was thin. Dozens of Vonari had died on Caro 7 during the diplomatic massacre. Children of nobles, aides, servants. A DNA trace was not proof. But the report continued. Attached, audio fragment, source, fortress ruins, imperial dialect. Her heart, a cold, regulated machine, gave a painful human lurch. She tapped the file. A voice filled the room. A child's voice, cracked with pain and dust. Mother. Illyra collapsed. Her knees hit the obsidian floor. The sound was a dagger, twisting in a wound that had never closed. She had heard that single word in her nightmares every night for 10 years. She had imagined it, screamed it into her pillow, wept for it in the soundproof despair of her chambers. But this was real. The voice was tiny, weak, but it was hers. It was her voice, her daughter's. She had been told, guaranteed, sworn to, that the child was ash, that the entire wing of the fortress had been vaporized. She had mourned. She had let the grief curdle inside her, turning her heart to stone, fueling the cold, precise rage that made her a terrifyingly effective ruler. And it had all been a lie. A human male, ex-military. The words burned. It was a human who had taken her, a grave robber, a kidnapper, a slaver, someone who saw her child, her blood, her heir, as a bounty. The rage that filled her was pure, white, and cleansing. It burned away the shock, leaving only a terrible, icy resolve. "My lords," she said, her voice echoing in the vast, empty hall. She was speaking to the walls, but she knew the walls were listening. Her council, her jailers, monitored her every word. The wall opposite her shimmered. 3 holographic figures, Vonari elders in their crimson council robes, flickered into existence. Their faces were masks of ancient, wrinkled disapproval. "Your Majesty," Lord Vorak, the new High Inquisitor, intoned. His voice was a gravelly rasp. "You are awake late. A patrol on Caros 7 has found a genetic anomaly," Illyra said, rising to her feet. Her voice was flat, metallic. "A child with Vonari DNA." Vorak's eyes narrowed. "Remnants of the massacre. Tragic, but irrelevant. The sector is a dead zone." "This child was alive," Illyra said, "and it was speaking the Imperial dialect." The silence that followed was absolute. The 3 holograms stared, their composure cracking. "Impossible," another counselor whispered. "Your line is—" "My line is right here," Illyra snapped, her cybernetic hand balling into a fist. "The intel suggests a human has taken the child." Vorak's face hardened. "A human? Then it is a matter for the Inquisitors. A simple retrieval. The human will be executed for theft. The child will be examined for purity." Illyra felt the trap. Exam. He meant terminated. A hybrid, a half-breed, would shatter the entire political foundation of their xenophobic empire, a foundation they had carefully rebuilt after the war. A foundation Illyra had been forced to endorse. "No," Illyra said, "Your Majesty?" Vorak's tone was a razor's edge. "This is not a simple retrieval. This is a matter of state, a matter of the bloodline. I will lead the retrieval mission myself." The holograms erupted. It was a breach of protocol, of security. It was madness. The Empress could not leave the palace, let alone the planet. "You are a prisoner, Illyra," Vorak said, dropping the pretense of her title. "For your own safety, you will remain on Vonar Prime. I will dispatch my Inquisitors. The matter will be handled, quietly." The holographic projections vanished. Illyra stood in the silence. They had cut her off. They would send their butchers to kill the human and execute her daughter. She walked back to her console, her movements calm, precise. She activated a different channel, one carved so deep into the palace's core that not even the Inquisitors knew it existed. "Xylus," she whispered. A single green rune glowed in response. "He is with a human," she said, her voice thick. "I do not know which one. Find me the Blood Hunter patrol that filed the report. Give me their coordinates, and prepare my personal ship, the Nyx. I am leaving the palace, now." The green rune flashed once. "At your command, my Empress." Illyra Vaughn, prisoner of her own court, walked to the hidden panel in her chamber floor, the one that led to the old, forgotten Maglev tunnels. She was breaking 10 years of surveillance, 10 years of carefully constructed obedience. She was risking a civil war. She did not care. She would burn the galaxy down to get her daughter back. Rex pushed the nomad's luck into the shadow of a hollowed-out asteroid. The colony was called Rust Haven, and it was a name it had earned. It was an old O'Neill cylinder, a failed utopian project from before the war. The rotation was failing, so gravity fluctuated, and the air scrubbers were only working at 60%. It was a floating slum for the galaxy's forgotten, deserters, smugglers, rogue AIs, and misfits. It was perfect. He docked in a private bay, paying the exorbitant fee with an untraceable credit chip. He carried the girl, who he had started calling Silver, into the pressurized, noisy corridors. She was awake now, but weak, her violet eyes wide with a silent, profound terror. She clung to his armor, her small fingers hooked into the seams. "It's all right," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "It's just a little further." He navigated the crowded neon-lit market, a place that smelled of ozone, unidentifiable fried foods, and stale, recycled air. He ignored the stares. A human in battered Earthcore armor carrying a Vonari-looking child was more than a curiosity. It was a target. He found the machine shop at the end of a dark corridor, sealed by a heavy airlock-style door. He pounded on it with his fist. A crude voice synthesis crackled over a speaker. "We're closed. Go away. Unless you're on fire. Even then, think twice. Juno, it's me. It's Rex." A heavy silence, then a string of curses, creative and biologically impossible. The door hissed open, revealing a figure that was more machine than human. Juno was a woman, or had been. Now, her two arms were massive, cybernetic appendages, one a delicate surgical tool, the other a heavy-duty hydraulic pincer. Her spine was reinforced with an external steel brace, and her left eye was a glowing red optic. She was grinning, her teeth too white. "Varn," she cackled. "Look at you. You look like 10 miles of bad road. I thought you were dead. Or worse, reintegrated. Good to see you too. Junis, I need your help." Juno's optic whirred, focusing past him. On the girl. The smile vanished. "Rex, you know the rules here. No bounties, no complications, and that is the biggest complication I've ever seen. Get her out." "I can't, she's hurt. And I need a scan, a real one. My field kit is glitching." Juno stared at the child, then at Rex. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the way he shielded the girl with his body. She sighed, a pneumatic hiss. "Damn you, Varn. You always did have a hero complex. Get in, before someone else sees her." Juno's shop was a chaotic masterpiece of wires, spare parts, and holographic schematics. She cleared a workbench with a sweep of her hydraulic arm, sending metal shards clattering to the floor. "Put her down and give me the story. Fast," Rex explained. "The fortress, the rubble, the Imperial dialect." "Imperial dialect?" Juno's red optic brightened with academic interest, overriding her caution. "That's rich. You didn't just find a stray. Rex, you found a unicorn." "She's a hybrid, Juno." "No kidding," Juno said, already passing a high-resolution medical scanner over the girl's small body. The girl trembled, but Rex put his hand on her shoulder, and she steadied. "Fix her leg," Rex said, his voice rough. "The splint is temporary." "Her leg is the least of your problems," Juno muttered, staring at the scanner's display. "Holy mother of code." She projected the DNA strand in the air, a glowing, rotating helix of blue and purple. "You were right," Juno said. "Human. Vonari. Almost a perfect 50-50 split. But you were wrong about the rest." "What rest?" "Your scanner said 2% unknown. My scanner, it says that 2% is active, and it's not unknown. It's a key. It's a dormant energy signature I've only seen in one place. Ancient Vonari ancestral field tech. The stuff they used to build their empire. The stuff they now call magic and pray to. This kid isn't just a hybrid. Rex, she's a weapon. Or a god. Or both. Rex stared at the glowing code, a cold dread settling in his stomach. Can you help her? I can set the bone. I can give her a nano-paste solution for malnutrition. I can make her healthy, Juno said, turning to him, her face grim. I cannot make her safe. This genome, it's a death sentence. The Vonari will kill her for being impure. The humans will kill her for being a Vonari weapon. You are holding a ticking bomb. Rex, I know. So what's the play? Sell her? Hide her? Rex hesitated. He looked at the girl. She was watching him, her violet eyes trusting clear. I don't know. He let Juno work. The girl was brave. She didn't cry when the surgical arm reset the bone, just bit her lip and held onto Rex's finger. He found a cot in the back of the shop, the air heavy with the smell of motor oil. He laid her down. She was asleep in seconds, the painkillers and the trauma finally claiming her. He sat down on a crate, his rifle across his knees. The exhaustion was a physical weight. You should sleep, Juno said, her voice softer. She was welding a new plate onto a combat drone, the blue sparks lighting her face. I can't. He closed his eyes just for a second. The smell of oil and ozone faded. It was replaced by the smell of night-blooming jasmine and sterile air. The hydroponic gardens on the Lyra moon base. He was there, 10 years younger, his uniform crisp, his face unlined by war. Aelira was in his arms. She had shed her heavy robes and was in a simple human-style tunic he had given her. Her silver skin was luminous in the starlight. They are watching me. Rex, she was whispering, her voice urgent, her lips brushing his ear. My father's inquisitors, they know I am compromised. Let them watch, he murmured, his hands tracing the line of her spine. I'm tired of hiding. You don't understand, she said, pulling back to look at him, her violet eyes desperate. Hiding is all we have. If they find out, if my father knows I have feelings for a human, he will have you executed, and he will marry me to Korath tomorrow. He saw the terror in her face, and it was real, and this was not a game to her. It was life and death. What do we do? He asked. She pressed her body against his, her heart hammering against his chest. We survive, apart, until we can find a way. I won't lose you, Aelira. You won't, she said, her voice fierce. She took his hand, the one that wore his signet ring, a simple band of earth-mined titanium. She pressed his hand to her collarbone. Then mark me, she begged, her voice breaking, the same words he had remembered in the ruins. Do it. Not a kiss, not a promise, a scar, a brand. Something that hurts, something that lasts, so that when that brute touches me, I can feel you. The intensity in her eyes, the raw, desperate, sensual need. It had overwhelmed him. It was a request that shattered the boundaries of their two species. It was possessive, brutal, and more intimate than any act of love. He had done it. He saw himself, a ghost, pressing the superheated edge of a small, modified power cell to her perfect silver skin. She hadn't cried out. She had just watched him, her eyes burning into his as her skin sizzled. Rex, wake up! Juno's cybernetic hand was on his shoulder, shaking him hard. The dream shattered. He was back in the shop. An alarm was blaring, a high, thin wail that cut through the noise of the colony. What is it? He yelled, grabbing his rifle. Intruders! Juno shouted, her optic glowing bright red. Airlock 12. They're not core. They're Vonari, black armor, inquisitors. Rex's blood turned to ice. They're here for her. They're here for us, Juno snapped, pulling a heavy plasma rifle from under her workbench. They're burning their way through the market. They're not asking questions. They're purging. Rex ran to the cot. The girl was awake, her eyes wide with terror. He scooped her up, his other hand on his sidearm. Back door, Juno said, pointing her pincer. Go. It leads to the maintenance tunnels. What about you? This is my home, Juno snarled, a terrifying feral grin on her face. These tin-plated zealots want to evict me? They can try. An explosion rocked the shop. The front door buckled inward, slagged and smoking. Go! Juno screamed, opening fire with her plasma rifle, a brilliant bolt of blue energy vaporizing the corridor outside. Rex did not hesitate. He ran, the girl in his arms, her face buried in his neck. He burst through the back door and into the dark, narrow tunnels. He heard Juno's rifle. He heard the alien shouts. He heard the high-pitched, terrifying shriek of a Vonari disruptor blade. Then he heard Juno scream, a sound that was half human, half static, and then it was cut off. The silence that followed was worse. Rex kept running. He did not look back. He found a ventilation shaft, his heart pounding a desperate rhythm against his ribs. He hid in the darkness, his hand over the girl's mouth. He could hear them, the heavy, measured footsteps of Vonari shock troops. Their armor hissed, their voices were low, guttural commands in their own language. They were hunting. He had brought this on Juno. He had brought this on himself. He had brought this on this child. The guilt was a physical sickness, a familiar poison. He had failed again, failed his squad on Cygnus, failed Elira, failed Juno. He remembered the last time he had been killed. It was during the evacuation of Sector 9. A Vonari warrior, his face a mask of rage, had been about to execute a row of civilian prisoners. Rex had put a single sniper round through his visor from 800 meters. It had been clean. It had been a war. It felt like justice. A shadow passed the grate. One of the inquisitors stopped. He was massive, his black armor etched with crimson runes. He tilted his helmet, his sensors tasting the air. He had their scent. The inquisitor raised his disruptor blade, its energy field humming, and turned toward the shaft. Rex looked at the girl. She was trembling so hard her teeth were chattering. She was going to die. He was going to die, and it would be for nothing. The soldier in him, the killer he had tried to bury, woke up. He put the girl down behind a large pipe. Stay here. Do not move. Do not make a sound. She nodded, her eyes vast pools of terror. Rex slid his kinetic rifle from his back. He checked the charge. 100%. He stepped out of the shadow, into the main tunnel, just as the Vonari Inquisitor ripped the grate from the wall. The Inquisitor saw him and raised his blade. Rex did not aim for the head. He did not aim for the chest. He put 3 tightly grouped shots into the Inquisitor's knees. The kinetic rounds, solid slugs of high-density metal, shattered the armor and the joints beneath. The warrior roared and fell, his blade clattering. Rex walked toward him. The Vonari looked up, hatred burning in his reptilian eyes. He fumbled for a sidearm. Rex kicked it away. He looked at the alien who had come to kill a child, who had just murdered his friend. The tremor in his hand was gone. There was only a cold, still calm. He raised his rifle, aimed it at the center of the Vonari's chest, and pulled the trigger. Again, and again, and again. He emptied the clip. The thud, thud, thud of the kinetic rounds, a brutal, punctuated a sound that echoed in the tunnel. He was not just killing him. He was ending him. He stood over the smoking, ruined armor, his breath coming in harsh gasps. The smell of ozone and cooked meat filled the air. He had just executed a surrendered enemy. He had not done that, even in the worst days of the war. He turned, his stomach churning, and almost vomited. The girl was watching him. She had crept out from behind the pipe. She was not looking at the dead Vonari. She was looking at Rex. There was no fear in her eyes now, only a strange, quiet understanding. He grabbed her hand. "We have to go." They made it back to the Nomad's Luck. The fighting was still raging in the market district. Juno had bought them the time they needed. He strapped the girl into the co-pilot's bunk, his hands shaking so badly he could barely fasten the buckles. The adrenaline was gone, leaving the horror. He had not just killed, he was murdered. And he had done it to protect her. He slumped into the pilot's chair, his hands covered in a fine mist of alien blood. He had to get out. But where? Tartarus was out. The Inquisitors would be watching every outlaw station. Earth was out. The Shadow Corps would be waiting. He had no doubt his own people were hunting him too. Juno was dead. There was only one place left. The one place no one would expect him to go. The one place that was a guaranteed death sentence. But it was the only place that mattered. He had to take her home. He had to take her to Alera. Maybe the Empress would kill him. Probably. But she would see her daughter. She would know. And maybe, just maybe, the woman he had known 10 years ago was still in there, beneath the scars and the ice. He powered the Nomad's Luck. "Hold on," he whispered to the girl. He punched in the coordinates, a course that was suicide, a direct high-burn route to the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. Vonner Prime. The High Council chamber of the Vonari Empire was a cavern of polished obsidian and floating light glyphs, designed to intimidate anyone who stood beneath its vaulted ceiling. Empress Elira Vaughn stood in the center of the dais, a solitary figure in black ceremonial armor, facing the 3 holographic projections of the High Lords. They loomed over her, 10 feet tall, their faces masks of ancient crumbling stone. High Inquisitor Vorak spoke first, his voice a subterranean rumble that shook the floor beneath her boots. He demanded to know why the royal hangar was being prepped for launch. He reminded her that she was forbidden to leave the capital. He spoke of protocols, of safety, of the fragile stability of the Empire. Elira listened, her cybernetic hand clenched at her side, the servos whining softly. For 10 years, she had listened. She nodded. She had signed their treaties and worn their robes and let them parade her as the grieving, silent widow of a war she despised. They had turned her into a statue, but the statue had cracked. Vorak ceased his lecture, waiting for her submission. Elira looked up. Her violet eyes were dry, burning with a cold, fusion-bright intensity. She did not shout. She did not plead. She simply stepped forward, the metal of her boots ringing against the stone. She told them that if the Nyx did not launch within the hour, she would abdicate. The silence that followed was absolute. The holographic flicker of the High Lords seemed to stutter. Abdication was not just political suicide, it was theological heresy. The Vonari believed the Emperor or Empress was the living anchor of their soul field. Without a direct descendant on the throne, the spiritual connection to their ancestors would be severed. The Empire would descend into civil war within a week. Lord Vorak scoffed, though his projection wavered. He called it a bluff. He told her she did not have the courage to destroy her own lineage. Elira reached up and unclasped the heavy jeweled collar of her office, the symbol of her divine right to rule. It was made of neutron star matter, impossibly heavy, priceless beyond calculation. She let it fall. It hit the obsidian floor with a sound like a gunshot, cracking the stone. She told them that she had already lost her husband. She had lost her father. She had lost her freedom. She had nothing left to lose but a title that felt like a shackle. She told them that a child had been found, a child that carried her blood, and she would burn the entire empire to ash before she let an inquisitor touch a single hair on her head. She was not asking for permission. She was giving them a choice, an empress who was absent for a few days, or an empire with no empress at all. The High Lords looked at the fallen caller. They looked at the woman who had turned from a grieving widow into a terrifying matriarch. Vorak bowed his head, the hologram shrinking back to human size. He granted her the launch clearance. But he warned her that if this was a deception, if the child was not hers, there would be no throne to return to. Illyra turned her back on them. She walked out of the chamber, stepping over the cracked stone, leaving the collar where it lay. She did not need a crown. She was a mother. The slipstream corridor known as the Gullet was a tear in the fabric of space, a swirling, unstable tunnel of violet gas and gravitational shears that cut through the dangerous neutrality zone between Earth and Vonar. It was a graveyard for ships. The navigational computers of modern vessels could not handle the shifting physics inside the wormhole. Rex Varn flew the Nomad's luck by hand. His hands, scarred and steady, danced over the manual controls. The ship shuddered and groaned, the hull plating screaming as the gravitational tides tried to tear it apart. Outside the viewport, the universe was a blur of impossible colors. Streaks of neon purple and bruised black. Beside him, strapped into the co-pilot's seat with a harness meant for a full-grown man. The girl watched. She was not afraid. She stared at the swirling chaos outside with wide, fascinated eyes. They had been in the Gullet for 12 hours. It cut the travel time to Vonar Prime by weeks. But the cost was exhausting. Rex's eyes burned, his body ached, but he could not stop. Every minute they wasted was a minute the hunters got closer. He glanced at her. She was clutching the small stunner he had given her. It was a standard-issue sidearm, modified to deliver a non-lethal shock. It was too big for her hand, but she held it with a seriousness that broke his heart. He engaged the autopilot for a brief stretch of stable space and swiveled his chair. He told her to show him how she held it. She lifted the weapon, her small fingers wrapping around the grip. She pointed it at the bulkhead. Her stance was wrong, her elbows were locked, her center of gravity too high. If she fired it, the recoil would knock her over. Rex reached out, gently correcting her posture. He told her to relax her arms, to absorb the kick, not fight it. He told her to aim with her eyes, not just the barrel. He spoke to her not as a child, but as a soldier. It was the only language he knew how to speak to someone he wanted to keep alive. She adjusted her grip. She looked up at him, and for a moment, the resemblance was so strong it stole the breath from his lungs. She had Illyra's eyes, the same violet depth, the same intelligence, but the chin, the stubborn set of the jaw, that was his. She asked him if he was going to shoot the bad men. Rex looked at his own hands, the hands that had killed an inquisitor in a tunnel on Rusthaven. He told her that he would do whatever he had to do. He told her that he would not let anyone hurt her. She lowered the stunner. She looked at the swirling lights outside. Then softly, she began to hum. It was a low, melodic sound, rising and falling like the tides of the wormhole. The tune was complex, melancholic, and hauntingly beautiful. Rex froze. He knew that song 10 years ago, on the balcony of the Lyra moon base. Illyra had hummed it to him. They had been watching the twin suns of her homeworld rise on a view screen. She had told him it was the song of the two stars, A lullaby Vonari mothers sang to their children to remind them that even when one sun sets, the other rises, that they are never truly in the dark. He listened to the girl's small, clear voice fill the cockpit of his battered freighter. It was the proof he hadn't realized he was still waiting for. The DNA scans were science. This was soul. This was memory, passed down in the blood or in the brief, stolen moments before the bombs fell. He closed his eyes, letting the melody wash over him, fighting the burn of tears he refused to shed. He was taking her home. He was taking her to the woman who had sung that song, the woman who had undoubtedly spent every night of the last 10 years staring into the dark, waiting for a sun that never rose. The nomad's luck lurched out of the gullet, stripped of fuel and running on fumes, and they needed refined hydrogen, and they needed it fast. The only option was Nebula's Edge. It was a floating pleasure station, a massive spinning disk of neon lights and vice anchored in the debris field of a destroyed planet. It was a place where the war had never really ended. It had just become a business. Mercenaries, smugglers, and spies mingled in the smoky casinos and brothels, trading secrets and credits. Rex docked the ship in the cheapest, darkest bay he could find. He told the girl to stay hidden in the smuggling compartment beneath the floorboards. He covered it with a rug and a crate of spare parts. He told her not to come out, no matter what she heard. He went out alone, his hood up, his kinetic rifle concealed under his long coat. The air of the station smelled of synthetic perfume, sweat, and expensive narcotics. He moved quickly, buying 3 canisters of fuel from a surly dockmaster who charged him triple the standard rate. He was hauling the last canister back to the ship when he felt the prickle on the back of his neck. The instinct, the same instinct that had saved him on Cygnus, on the moon, in the tunnels. He did not turn around. He kept walking, his pace steady. He saw his reflection in a panel of dark glass. 2 figures were following him. One was a massive reptilian humanoid, a Trandoshan bounty hunter with a heavy repeater slung over his shoulder. The other was a human, slick and cybernetic, with eyes that glowed a predatory blue. They weren't inquisitors, they were freelancers. Scum who had picked up the open bounty on the Vonari hybrid that had hit the shadow net hours ago. Rex turned the corner into the docking bay and dropped the fuel canister. He spun, drawing his rifle in a fluid motion. The Trandoshan roared, raising his weapon. Rex put a round through his shoulder before he could pull the trigger. The alien howled and dropped the gun. The human was faster. He activated a personal shield and charged, a vibro blade springing from his wrist. Rex sidestepped, bringing the stock of his rifle down on the man's arm. Bone crunched. The man grunted but didn't stop, slashing at Rex's chest. The blade cut through his coat and scored the armor beneath. Rex didn't feel it. He felt only the cold red rage that lived in the center of his chest now. He dropped the rifle and grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it until the cybernetic shrieked and sparked. He drove his knee into the man's stomach, then slammed his head into the bulkhead. The man crumpled, but the Trandoshan was back up. He had drawn a sidearm with his good hand. He wasn't aiming at Rex. He was aiming at the ship, at the ramp, at the girl. Silver had not stayed hidden. She was standing at the top of the ramp, the stunner in her hand, her eyes wide with terror. She heard the fight and came to help him. "No!" Rex screamed. The Trandoshan grinned and squeezed the trigger. Rex moved. He didn't think. He simply threw himself into the path of the bolt. The plasma round hit his left shoulder, burning through the armor and searing the flesh beneath. The impact spun him around, knocking him to the deck. Pain, white-hot and blinding, exploded in his arm, but he didn't stop. He rolled, grabbing his fallen rifle with his good hand. He didn't aim. He let the instinct take over. He fired 3 shots from the hip. The first hit Trandoshan in the gut, the second in the chest, the third took off half his jaw. The alien fell backward, dead before he hit the floor. Rex scrambled up, ignoring the screaming agony in his shoulder. He ran to the ramp, scooping up the girl with his good arm. She was crying, clinging to him. He threw her into the ship and slammed the airlock control. He dragged himself to the cockpit, blood dripping from his coat. He punched the ignition. The Nomad's luck tore away from the dock, ripping the fuel lines, leaving a trail of fire and debris in its wake. He jumped to hyperspace before they even cleared the station's gravity well, a dangerous, desperate maneuver that made the hull groan in protest. When the stars blurred into lines of light, Rex finally collapsed into the pilot's chair. He looked at his hands. They were covered in blood, his own, and the alien's. He was shaking again. He had almost lost her. He had turned into a butcher again. He looked at the girl. She was huddled in the corner of the cockpit, staring at him. She wasn't looking at his wound. She was looking at his face, at the violence that was still etched there. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice a broken rasp. "I'm so sorry." She crawled over to him. She didn't say anything. She just reached out and placed her small hand on his uninjured arm. She squeezed. It was forgiveness. It was trust. And it terrified him more than the plasma bolt. They were 2 hours from the Vonner system when the sensors screamed. A ship had dropped out of hyperspace directly in their path. It was not a patrol boat. It was not a frigate. It was a dreadnought. The Nyx, the personal flagship of the Empress. It was a masterpiece of Vonari engineering, a sleek, dagger-shaped vessel of black metal and violet energy veins. 5 times the size of the Nomad's Luck. Its weapons were powered up, its tractor beam locked onto them instantly. Rex's ship shuddered as the invisible hand grabbed it. The engines whined and died. They were caught. "Rex," the girl whispered. "It's okay," Rex said, though his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He stood up, wincing as his burnt shoulder protested. He checked his rifle, then holstered it. He checked his reflection in the dark console. He looked like a madman, ragged, bloody, unshaven. "Is it the bad men?" "No," Rex said. He looked at the view screen, at the sleek black ship that filled the void. "It's someone else." The comms crackled. "Unidentified freighter. You are in violation of Imperial airspace. Prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in immediate vaporization." The voice was not Elira's. It was a captain, cold and professional. Rex didn't answer. He waited. A moment later, the docking clamps engaged with a metallic thud. The airlock cycled. Rex stood in the center of his small, messy cargo hold. He had told the girl to wait in the cockpit. He wanted to do this alone first. He needed to know if he was about to be executed. The airlock hissed open. Steam poured out. Rex's hand hovered near his blaster. He expected a squad of inquisitors. He expected stormtroopers. Instead, a single figure walked through the mist. She was tall, regal, terrifying. She wore the black armor of the Vonari royalty, but she wore no helmet. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe braid. Her face was a mask of icy control, marred only by the spiderweb scars on her left side. Her cybernetic arm gleamed in the harsh light of the cargo hold. Elira. She stopped 10 feet from him. She did not draw a weapon, but her very presence was a threat. She looked at him. Her violet eyes swept over his battered armor, his bloodied coat, the gray in his beard, the lines of pain around his eyes. For a moment, the mask slipped. He saw the shock. He saw the recognition. He saw the ghost of the girl who had kissed him in a hydroponic garden. "Rex," she said. Her voice was not the cold instrument of the Empress. It was the voice he remembered, breathless, disbelieving. "Elira," he replied. Then the mask snapped back into place. Her eyes hardened. She took a step forward, her cybernetic hand clenching. "Where is she?" she demanded. "She's safe," Rex said. He didn't move. "Safe?" Elira's voice rose, trembling with a fury that had been fermenting for a decade. "You stole a child. You brought her into a war zone. You are a fugitive, Rex Varn. Give her to me." "I didn't steal her," Rex said, his voice low and steady. "I saved her. I found her in the dirt on Caro 7, buried, alone, dying. Where were you, Elira? Where was her mother?" It was a cruel question. He saw it land like a slap. Elira flinched. Pain, raw and naked, flashed across her face. "I thought she was dead," she whispered, the anger draining away to reveal the gaping wound beneath. "They told me she was dead. I mourned her every day for 10 years. She called for you," Rex said, "in the ruins. She called for her mother." Elira let out a choked sound, half sob, half gasp. She took another step, her hand reaching out, not in a threat, but in a plea. "Let me see her, please." Rex hesitated. He looked at this woman, this empress who commanded fleets, who could vaporize him with a word. He didn't see a ruler. He saw a mother who had been broken, but the soldier in him was still wary. "Is it safe?" he asked. "The council, the inquisitors, if they know—" "Damn the council!" Elira hissed, her eyes blazing. "I am the empress. She is my daughter. I will burn this galaxy to cinders before I let them touch her again. I promise you. Rex, on my life, on our past." She looked at him, her gaze dropping to the collar of his armor, to the place where he had hidden the ring she gave him, though she couldn't see it. But she knew. The connection between them crackled in the air, heavy with unresolved passion, betrayal, and a decade of silence. Rex slowly took his hand off his blaster. He nodded. He turned toward the cockpit door. "Silver," he called out softly. "Come here." There was a pause. Then, the sound of small footsteps. The girl appeared in the doorway. She was clutching the stunner, dragging it slightly. She looked small, fragile, and impossibly brave. She looked from Rex to the tall, silver-skinned woman standing in the cargo hold. Elira froze. She stopped breathing. She stared at the child. She saw the silver hair. She saw the pointed ears. She saw her own eyes staring back at her from a face that was a perfect, miraculous blend of two species. The girl took a step forward. She tilted her head. The connection was instant, primal, biological. It bypassed logic and went straight to the blood. The girl dropped the stunner. It clattered on the deck. Her lip trembled. She looked at the woman's face, at the scars, at the silver skin that matched her own. "Mother," she whispered. The word was Vanari, high and pure. Elira Vaughn, the Iron Empress, the woman who had stared down the High Council and threatened to destroy her own throne, crumbled. She fell to her knees on the dirty metal deck of the freighter. She didn't care about the grime. She didn't care about the dignity of her station. She held out her arms, the flesh one and the metal one, her face wet with sudden streaming tears. "Yes," Elira choked out. "Yes, I am here, I am here." The girl ran. She crossed the distance in 3 strides and threw herself into Elira's arms. Elira caught her, pulling her close, burying her face in the girl's dusty silver hair. She rocked back and forth, sobbing, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief that echoed off the bulkheads. She held the child as if she were trying to reabsorb her into her own soul. Rex watched them. He stood in the shadows, his hand still resting near his gun, his shoulder throbbing with fire. He felt like an intruder. He felt like a ghost. He had completed the mission. He had delivered the package. But as he watched Illyra weep over the child he had saved, the child who had slept on his knee and trusted him to kill monsters, he realized the terrifying truth. The mission wasn't over. It was just beginning, and he wasn't ready to let go. The bridge of the Nyx was a silent, soaring cathedral of black crystal and violet light. It was the heart of Vonari power, and Rex Varn felt like a microbe on its altar. He sat in a high-backed observation chair, his shoulder expertly mended by an automated surgical arm. The hole in his armor had been patched, his coat cleaned. He looked less like a bum fighter and more like a prisoner of war, which he supposed he was. Illyra stood across the bridge, her back to him, watching the swirling gray-blue of hyperspace. The girl, her daughter, was asleep in Illyra's private quarters, under the guard of 2 royal sentinels. They had been on the Nyx for 6 hours. 6 hours of perfect, sterile, and agonizing silence. Finally, Rex spoke. His voice was a dry rasp in the pristine air. "So this is life, an iron throne, a bigger cage." Illyra's cybernetic hand clenched. She turned, her black armor seeming to drink the light. The scarred side of her face was a roadmap of her rage. "A cage you helped build. That's not fair," he said, standing up. "Fair?" she hissed, stalking toward him. "You want to talk about fair? You left me. You disappeared. I was at the peace summit, pregnant, surrounded by my father's butchers. And you were gone. When the bombs fell, when my father died, when Korath took me. Where were you, Rex? Where was the great human hero?" Her voice broke on the last word. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and sharp. "I didn't leave you," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I was reassigned, stripped of my post. I thought you'd had me sent away." What?" Her fury faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "I thought your father found out and you'd sold me out to save yourself. I was on a garbage scow halfway to the outer rim when the war started." He took a step closer, his own anger, a colder, slower burning thing rising to meet hers. "When I heard about the summit, about the bombing, I thought you were dead. For 3 days. I thought you were dead. When I saw your face on the broadcast, standing in the rubble, I stole a ship, a fast courier. I was coming for you." Illyra stared at him, her violet eyes wide, searching for him. You were coming back? I never made it past the Vonari blockade. Your new husband's fleet picked me up." He let out a harsh, dry laugh. "General Korath, your hero. He recognized my name. He knew exactly who I was." The blood drained from Illyra's face. "What did he do?" "He didn't kill me. That would have been too clean. He wanted to make an example. He wanted the human emissary who defiled the princess to understand Vonari justice." Rex unlatched the front plate of his armor. He pulled aside the tattered undershirt. His chest and stomach were a ruin of old scars. Not the clean lines of surgery, but the raised, ragged keloids of energy whips and chemical burns. "I spent 2 years in the Korafel labor camp. It's a methane ice moon. Your guards don't even wear helmets, they just let the cold do the work. Korath sent them a personal message. Keep him alive. Keep him broken. By the time I cut my way out, the war was over. You were the Empress. And I was just a ghost with poor timing." Illyra's organic hand flew to her mouth. A strangled sob escaped. It was not his abandonment that had defined their history. It was her husband's cruelty. The man she had been forced to marry had tortured the man she had loved. She saw the last 10 years, her coldness, her grief, her isolation, in a new, horrific light. She had been mourning a lie. "Rex," she whispered, her hand, the metal one, reaching out. She touched the largest scar, the one that snaked over his ribs. Her metallic fingers, impossibly gentle, traced its path. He did this because of me. He did this because he was a monster," Rex said, his voice flat. He didn't pull away. He couldn't. The ship's automated voice, a soft Vonari alto, interrupted the moment. "Hypersleep transition required. Long-range jump in progress. All crew to pods in 10 minutes." They were jumping to a secure Vonari outpost, a place where Alira could rally her few loyalists. The hypersleep bay was a quiet, cold room, lined with gleaming white pods. The girl was already inside hers, a smaller, custom-fit alcove. She looked like she was sleeping in a pearl, her face peaceful, her silver hair fanned out. Alira stood before the child's pod, her hand resting on the glass. "She is perfect," she whispered. "I missed everything, her first word, her first steps. I missed 10 years. All because of him, because of all of them." Rex came up behind her. The anger was gone, replaced by a shared, aching void. "You have her now. Alira." Alira turned to face him. The Empress was gone. In the low blue light of the pod bay, she was just a woman, scarred and broken and beautiful. Her cybernetic hand was still at her side, but her organic one rose, tracing the line of his jaw. "You brought her back, after everything I believed, after everything he did to you. You still brought her home to me." "I didn't do it for you," he lied, his voice rough. "I did it for her. I couldn't let her die." "You are a terrible liar, Rex Varn," she whispered. She looked at his lips. His own gaze dropped. Her armor was off, and she was in the simple black undersuit. He saw the hollow of her collarbone, and he saw the mark. It was faint, a pale silver-white swirl against her silver skin, but it was there. The brand he had put on her, a lifetime ago, on a neutral moon base, when they were just two foolish, hopeful people in love. "You kept it. It was the only part of you they couldn't take from me," she said, her voice thick. "When Korath, when he was with me, I would press my hand to it, and I would remember what was real." He couldn't breathe. He raised his hand, his thumb tracing the scar. Her skin was warm. He felt her pulse, rapid and strong beneath his touch. She leaned in. He met her. The kiss was not gentle. It was not a reunion. It was a collision. It was 10 years of stolen time, of pain, of grief, of smoldering, unquenched desire. It was the bitterness of his prison and the coldness of her throne, all melting in a sudden, brutal heat. He tasted the salt of his own past on her lips. His hand tangled in her silver hair, pulling her closer. Her metal arm wrapped around his back, holding him with a strength that was both hers and not, digging into his armor as if she was afraid he would vanish again. He kissed the symbol on her collarbone, a promise finally kept. She kissed the scars on his chest, an apology finally given. A wailing alarm shattered the moment. It was not the soft chime of the hypersleep warning. It was the harsh, screaming klaxon of a combat alert. Red lights flashed, bathing the bay in bloodlight. The automated voice was no longer calm. "Evasive maneuvers. Unidentified vessels emerging from shadow space. Hull breach on Deck 7. Rex and Alira broke apart, their passion instantly replaced by the cold, sharp instincts of war. "What is it?" Rex yelled, already grabbing for the rifle he'd slung on his back. "It can't be," Alira said, her face pale. She ran to the nearest console. "Vorak? The Inquisitors?" The comms crackled. A new voice filled the air. It was human, cold, synthesized, and devoid of emotion. Imperial Vessel Nix, you are in violation of Interstellar Accord 7. Power down your weapons and surrender the hybrid anomaly. Failure to comply will be met with immediate escalation. Rex froze. Shadow Core. Who? Alira demanded, her eyes flying over her console. 3 ships, Earth dreadnoughts, black, no markings. They're surrounding us. Earth's Black Ops, Rex said, his voice grim. The boogeymen. They don't take prisoners. Accord 7. What is Accord 7? Alira's cybernetic hand smashed the console, cracking the crystal. It was a secret treaty, a contingency, proposed by Earth, signed by my father's council after the bombing. Her voice was shaking with a new, more profound betrayal. It authorizes the termination of any high-threat Venari human hybrid. They didn't just agree to hunt her. They made it law. They're not here to talk, Alira. They're here to kill her. The Nix shuddered violently as a plasma lance scored its shields. To the bridge, Alira commanded. She hit a button, and the girl's hypersleep pod sealed with a hiss, a reinforced metal shield sliding over the glass. She's the safest there. We have to fight. They ran. The ship was a chaos of alarms and Venari crew members scrambling to their stations. They made it to the bridge just as another volley hit. The ship screamed. Shields at 40%, the Venari captain shouted. They're using particle disruptors. Our armor is failing. Return fire, Alira commanded, strapping herself into the command chair. All batteries, target their engines. They're too fast. Rex stood by the main viewport, watching the 3 black ships dance around them, firing with cold, mechanical precision. This was not a fight. It was an execution. They're launching boarding parties, the tactical officer yelled. 2 torpedoes. They're not armed. They're boarders. Impact in 10 seconds. Alira, Rex said, his voice low. The bridge. They'll come for the bridge. They know she's here. I will not run, Alira said, her face a mask of iron. You don't have to. Rex checked the charge on his rifle. Just tell your guards not to shoot me. The impact was a dull thud that shook their teeth. Then another. They're in, the captain yelled. Deck 5, Deck 3. They're cutting through the bulkheads. Rex moved to the main bridge door, a massive slab of reinforced obsidian. Alira nodded to her 2 personal guards, and they took up positions beside him. The first wave of Shadow Corps soldiers came 5 minutes later. They moved in perfect silent formation, their black armor absorbing the light, their visors blank, red optics. They didn't shout, they just fired. Rex and the Venari guards opened up. The corridor became a hell of purple Venari plasma and white-hot kinetic rounds. Rex fought like a man possessed, his movements economical, precise. Every shot was a kill, but they kept coming. Alira was at the tactical station, diverting power, firing the ship's thrusters, trying to shake the other 2 dreadnoughts. I can't break free, she yelled. They're through, one of her guards screamed, before a particle bolt dissolved his head. The main bridge door exploded inward, a cloud of shrapnel and black smoke. Rex grabbed the remaining guard and dived behind a console. Black-armored soldiers poured in, their weapons raised. Alira drew her sidearm, a sleek Venari disruptor, and began firing from her chair. Her cybernetic arm unspooled a hidden energy whip, which cracked out and sliced a soldier in 2. It wasn't over. A heavy-weapon soldier stepped through the smoke. He carried a particle cannon. He didn't aim at Alira. He aimed at the hypersleep bay, at the child's pod. No! Rex roared. He broke cover, he ran, firing his rifle, drawing the soldier's attention. The soldier turned, surprised. Rex was too close. He shoved Alira and her chair aside with a desperate lunge. The soldier fired. Rex took the full blast of the particle cannon in the center of his chest. His armor, the armor that had survived a plasma bolt, glowed white-hot and then vaporized. The kinetic force lifted him off his feet and threw him across the bridge. He slammed into the bulkhead next to the hypersleep bay and crumpled to the floor. A smoking ruin. "Rex!" Illyra's cry was a physical thing, a sound of such profound loss it ached. The soldier raised his cannon again, this time at Illyra, and then something happened. The girl's hypersleep pod, the one that was shielded and sealed, blew open from the inside. She stood there, not on the floor but floating an inch above it. Her silver hair was standing on end, crackling with a pale golden light. Her eyes were open, they were not violet. They were pure, solid, burning white. She was not afraid. She was not angry. She was just awake. She looked at the soldier who had shot Rex. She looked at her mother who was weeping. She looked at the man on the floor, the man who had taught her to aim, the man who was bleeding out from a hole in his chest. She opened her mouth. It was not a scream. It was not a word. It was a note, a single pure frequency that set Rex's teeth on edge. A wave of visible golden energy erupted from her. It was not a fire. It was not plasma. It was peace. A terrible, absolute peace. The wave hit the Shadow Corps soldiers. They did not burn. They did not explode. They just stopped. Their armor dissolved, turning to fine gray dust. Their bodies, their weapons, everything, simply unmade. The energy wave washed over them, and they ceased to exist. The wave expanded, passing through the Nyx without harming its Venari crew. It hit the 2 boarding craft docked to the hull. They vanished. It hit the 3 Earth dreadnoughts. Their engines died. Their lights went out. Their particle disruptors went silent. The battle was over. On the bridge, there was a stunned, absolute silence. The only sound was the faint hiss of failing electronics and the drip, drip of Rex's blood onto the deck. The girl's light faded. Her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed, unconscious. Illyra didn't move for a second. She was paralyzed by shock. Then she scrambled, not to her daughter, but to Rex. "He's alive!" she screamed, her hand pressing against the horrific wound. "Medic! I need a medic, now!" Her Venari captain, his face ashen, stumbled over. He checked the readouts on his wrist. "My Empress, the enemy ships are dead. Their life support is gone. Whatever that was, it just erased them." He looked at the small, unconscious child. "What? Is she?" Illyra looked at the hole in Rex's chest. She looked at her daughter, who had just annihilated 3 capital ships without a thought. She knew the answer. "She's our only hope, and she's our greatest target." Juno's voice echoed in her memory, the words Rex had shared with her. A weapon, or a god. "Get him to do auto-surgery," Illyra commanded, her voice steady. "Now, Captain, get the engines back online." "Where are we going, Majesty? Vonar Prime is compromised. Earth will send more. They will all send more." Illyra looked at the blackness of space, at the dark, drifting hulks of the Earth ships. There was only one place in the galaxy so dangerous, so forbidden, that no one would dare follow. Set a course for the Cthulhu Sanctuary. The captain's blood ran cold. "My Empress, the sanctuary is a myth. It's in the accretion disk of the Cthulhu black hole. Nothing survives the event horizon's shadow." "We will," Illyra said. She gently touched her daughter's face. "The Venari ancestors built that temple in the shadow of the singularity. They used the old magic, the energy I just saw." She stood up, her face set. "They will never stop hunting her. Not Earth. Not our own people, so we will not run. We will hide. In the one place the gods themselves are afraid to look. Slingshot us around the primary. Go dark, and pray he lives. The Cthulhu sanctuary was not built. It was woven. It hung in the dark, in the precise, impossible orbit where the accretion disk of the black hole met the event horizon's shadow. It was a temple of living obsidian-like material, a lattice of arches and spires that caught the bent light of dying stars, pulling it in and turning it into a soft, internal golden glow. Time here was elastic. A minute felt like an hour like a day. It was a place of profound, terrifying peace, anchored in the throat of annihilation. For 3 days. Rex Varn did not move. He lay in a biocradle filled with a shimmering pearl-white nutrient gel, the Nyx's most advanced automated surgeon having rebuilt his chest. The particle bolt had missed his heart by millimeters, but the damage had been catastrophic. The cradle was knitting him back together, molecule by molecule. Elira never left his side. She sat on the cold stone floor, her black armor discarded, wearing only the simple, dark undersuit. She watched his vital signs on a floating Vonari display. She watched the girl, her daughter. Kira, a name she had whispered to the sleeping child, a name from the ancient Vonari legends meaning survivor. Watch him. Kira would sit for hours at the foot of the cradle, her small hand resting on the translucent lid, as if her touch alone was part of the healing. The power she had unleashed, the golden annihilating wave, was dormant again. She was just a child, her violet eyes, so like Elira's, filled with a quiet, patient worry. On the 4th day, Rex woke. His first sensation was a deep, dull ache. His second was the smell of ozone and old, cold stone. He saw Elira's face, her silver scars and violet eyes, and for a moment, he thought he was in the afterlife. "You're a fool," she whispered, her voice rough, her hand coming up to rest on his forehead. Her skin was warm, not an afterlife. Then, "It was bad aim," he rasped, his throat raw. She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You died, Rex. For 2 minutes on the surgical table, you died." "Bad habits," he said. He tried to sit up. The pain was immediate, a bonfire in his chest. "Stay still," she commanded, her hand pressing him gently but firmly back into the gel. "The cradle needs 1 more day. The wound is sealed, but your muscles, your nerves, they are still reforming." He relaxed, letting the warm gel support him. He looked at Kira, who was now smiling, a small, tentative expression that lit up her face. She saved us." "She saved you," Elira said, her voice dropping, a shadow of awe and terror in it. "She unmade them. 3 capital ships, Rex, 2 boarding parties, just erased." Kira flinched, as if the memory was a physical blow. She came closer, putting her head on the edge of the cradle near Rex's shoulder. "The men, they were loud, inside," she whispered, her small voice echoing in the vast silent temple. "They wanted to hurt us. I made them quiet." Rex looked at Elira, seeing the same fear mirrored in her eyes. This was not a child. This was a force of nature. The next day he was out of the cradle, unsteady on his feet, his chest wrapped in a black biosynthetic weave. He was weak, but he was whole. The Nyx, damaged but functional, was docked within the temple's central energy field, hidden from any long-range scans. They were alone, the 3 of them, and a skeleton crew of Elira's most loyal guards, who patrolled the temple's outer rings. The quiet moments began. The silence of the sanctuary was absolute, broken only by their voices. They were the only living things in a forgotten miracle. They ate Vonari rations, nutritious and bland. But Rex, restless, went to the Nix's cargo bay. He found his old gear, the supplies from the Nomad's luck that Elira's crew had transferred. Among them, a bag of dried synthetic grain and a packet of vacuum-sealed, preserved spices. He found a heat plate in the ship's galley. That night, in the golden, ethereal light of the temple, he cooked. He made a poor, simple human gruel, a thin, spicy stew. It was the food of soldiers and scavengers. He offered a bowl to Elira. She looked at it, this steaming, unrefined alien food. She took it. She ate. She closed her eyes. "It's terrible," she said, her voice soft. "I know," he said. "And wonderful," she finished. She took another bite, a small smile playing on her lips. Kira ate 3 bowls. They fell into a rhythm. Rex taught Kira how to play rock, paper, scissors. Elira taught them both how to read the complex Venari star charts that swirled on the temple walls, a living map of the galaxy. They talked. They shared the 10 years that had been stolen. He told her about the ice moon, about the escape, about the long, hollow years of scavenging, haunted by the ghost of a princess he thought had betrayed him. She told him about her court, about the golden cage, the paranoia, the endless political maneuvering of the High Lords. She told him about the cold, empty bed, and the nights she spent in the observatory, staring at the star system where Lyra Moonbase had been, wondering if he was alive, hating him for leaving, loving him for the memory. They slept in the main chamber, on thermal blankets laid on the warm stone. At first, in shifts. Then, exhausted, they slept. At the same time, Kira curled between them. One night, Rex woke from a nightmare, his chest aching, the smell of methane ice in his nostrils. Elira was awake, watching him, her face illuminated by the swirling light of the black hole's edge. "They're gone." "Rex," she whispered. He just nodded, his breath coming hard. She moved, shifting from her blanket to his. She lay down beside him, not touching, just present, her warmth, her scent, a mix of Venari ozone and something uniquely, achingly her. "I am here," she said. He turned, his body screaming for contact, for proof that this was real. He put his arm around her, wincing at the pull on his new scars. She settled against his chest, her cybernetic hand resting on his heart, her organic one on his cheek. They just lay there, 2 broken soldiers breathing in the dark. Kira, however, was not at peace. She began to have visions. She would sit, staring at the swirling walls, her eyes unfocused. She would whisper. "Burning," she said one evening, as Rex was cleaning his rifle. "What's burning, Kira?" he asked. "The white towers, the silver-skinned city." She looked at him, her eyes wide with a terror that was not her own. "I see them. On Earth, on Vonner. They are all burning, the Inquisitors and the Black Armor men. They are not stopping. They blame me." She grabbed her head. "A choice. They keep saying there is a choice, but both are fire." Rex looked at Elira. The child was a psychic amplifier, and this place was showing her the future, a future they were creating by their very existence. "We can't hide," Rex said later, when Kira was asleep. "She's a beacon. This place, her power, they'll find us. We aren't safe. We're just waiting." "Then what do we do?" Elira asked, her voice desperate. "We run. They will hunt us. We fight. We saw what happened. Earth and Vonner. They are united on this. Rex, they have agreed. We need to know what they agreed to," Rex said, a cold, hard resolve setting in. "Juno." Elira looked confused. "Juno? Your friend? The one who died?" "Maybe," Rex said. Or maybe she's just a very stubborn ghost. He went to the Nix's communication array. It was a marvel of Venari technology, capable of sending a quantum-entangled signal through the slipstream. He encrypted it, using old dead smuggler codes. He aimed it at the last known shadow server on Rusthaven. He sent a single burst. Juno, it's Rex. I'm alive. I have the package. Need a sit rep. And I need a ghost in the machine. He didn't expect a reply. It was a message in a bottle thrown into a sea of static. For 2 days, there was nothing. They lived. They ate. They waited. The tension between Rex and Alira had become a living thing, a magnetic field that pulled them together. The night after he sent the signal, they were sitting by the main viewport, watching the black hole eat a stream of interstellar dust. "You're afraid," he said. "I am an empress," she said, her voice stiff. "I am not afraid." "You're terrified," he countered, his voice gentle. "Of them." He nodded at the sleeping child. "Of what she is. Of what this means." "Yes," she whispered, her facade crumbling. I am terrified that I have brought this end of the world into the universe. I am terrified that I can't protect her, and I am terrified of what I feel." "What do you feel, Alira?" he asked, his voice low. She turned to him. "I feel the same way I did on Lyra, when I was just a girl and you were just a man. Before the titles and the scars and the war, I feel home." He reached out, his hand touching her face. "Me too." He kissed her this time. It was not a collision. It was a surrender. It was slow and deep and desperate. It was a decade of stored-up longing, of pain, of what-ifs. Her hands, metal and flesh, were in his hair, on his chest, pulling him close. "My armor," she whispered, her voice choked. "In the cockpit, in my chair's core, I couldn't wear it. Not with Korath, but I couldn't destroy it." He knew, before she said it. "Your ring," she sobbed, pressing her forehead against his. "I still have it. Rex, I've had it this whole time. A piece of you, a piece of Earth." They sank to the floor, onto the blankets, in the golden light of the temple. They made love, a raw, frantic, and profoundly healing act. It was 2 halves of a soul clicking back into place, in the shadow of the singularity. They were not an empress and a deserter. They were just Alira and Rex, and they were, for a few short hours, finally whole. The Nix's console chimed. Rex was awake in an instant. Alira was asleep in his arms, her silver hair fanned across his chest. He gently extricated himself and went to the comms. One message, encrypted. He opened it. A holographic image flickered to life. Juno. She looked like hell. Half her face was new, synthetic skin, mismatched and raw. Her red optic was brighter, angrier. She was in a dark room, sparks flying behind her. "You magnificent galaxy-destroying bastard," she cackled, her voice a rough synthetic rasp. "You're alive, and you've started a war. I love it." "Juno," Rex breathed, a wave of relief washing over him. "You're alive? Mostly? The Inquisitors rebuilt my shop, with me in it. Big mistake." Her grin was feral. "I've been borrowing their network ever since. What do you need, Rex? I'm already in the system." "The treaty? Accord 7. I need to know everything." "Accord 7? She laughed. "That's the public file. A cute little contingency. No, you want Project Chimera, the real treaty, signed by your Shadow Corps and her Inquisitors 5 years ago. It's not a contingency, Rex. It's a standing order, a joint task force, with a kill-on-sight directive for any hybrid, royal or not." Juno's face turned grim. This isn't about balance of power, this is about purity. Both sides are terrified. They think a hybrid, a blend, will be the end of their pure species, that she'll be a symbol for something new. They're right. She forwarded the file, the original treaty, signed, sealed, and the kill orders, active. They're not just hunting you. Rex, Juno's voice was low. They're cooperating, sharing intel. The attack on the Nix, that was a joint op. The Venari gave the Shadow Corps your jump coordinates. They're all in it together. The comlink cut. Rex stood in the silence, the data burning on the screen. It was worse. It was so much worse. Elira was standing behind him, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale. She had heard it all. They gave me to them, she whispered, her voice dead. My own counsel, Vorak. He fed me to the wolves, to kill his empress and her abomination in one clean strike and blame Earth for it. They'll never stop, Rex said. We can't hide. We can't run. They're united. They'll just keep coming. So what is left, she said, her voice breaking. Rex looked at the data. He looked at Kira, sleeping peacefully. He looked at Elira, the rightful empress, betrayed by her own. We changed the game, he said, the old fire returning to his eyes. They're united in the shadows, and we unite the people in the light. We go public. Public? Rex, they will call us liars, terrorists. Let them, Rex said, a grim smile on his face. We have the Nix. We have this temple, an energy source that can amplify a signal across the quadrant. And we have the truth. He walked to her, taking her hands. We record a message. You, as the Empress, betrayed. Me, as the human soldier hunted by his own. And Kira, as the child they are so terrified of. Terrified, Elira said, the word tasting strange. She looked at Kira. Juno's right. They're terrified. She's a symbol. So let's give them one, Rex said. It took an hour. They stood in the main chamber, the golden light swirling around them. The Nix's recording drone floated in the air. Elira, in her full black armor. Her face set, spoke first. She told her people of the High Council's betrayal, of Lord Vorak's treason, of the lie that had kept her from her child. Rex, in his scarred earth armor, spoke next. He told of Project Chimera, of the Shadow Corps' secret war, of the execution order on an innocent child, and he showed the data Juno had sent. Then, they brought Kira. She stood between them, holding Elira's metal hand and Rex's flesh and blood one. She just looked at the camera, her violet eyes clear and steady. This is not an abomination, Elira said, her voice shaking with a mother's fury. This is not a weapon. This is Kira von Varn. She is the heir to both our worlds. She is the first, and she is the future. We will not hide, and we will not run. We are asking for peace, but if you come for our daughter, we will show you a god. Rex hit the transmit button. The Nix, amplified by the sanctuary's ancient power, tore the message from the disk and hurled it at the galaxy. It bypassed military channels. It flooded civilian news waves, rebel pirate broadcasts, and open-source channels. From Earth to Vonner Prime, their faces, their story, and the truth of Project Chimera was on every screen. For a moment, there was silence, a blessed, profound silence. Rex pulled Elira close, kissing her forehead. It's done. No, Elira whispered, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. It's just begun. The map of the sanctuary, the void outside the black hole's shadow, was suddenly impossibly full. Dozens of red icons, dozens of greens. They were waiting, Rex said, his blood running cold. The broadcast, it was a beacon, They were just waiting for us to confirm we were here. He looked at the view screen. Outside the Golden Temple, the dark void was lighting up. Vonari Inquisitor ships, blades out, engines burning hot, and Earth Shadow Core dreadnoughts, black and terrible, their particle cannons already glowing. They had come together, and they were here to finish the job. The Cthulhu Sanctuary, a place of eternal silence, screamed. The silence had been shattered by the concussive roar of breaching charges. The obsidian walls, woven by ancient hands to withstand the gravitational shear of a black hole, now shuddered under the assault of particle cannons and kinetic rams. The golden light that usually suffused the temple was choked by black smoke and the strobing, violent flashes of plasma fire. Rex Varn slid across the polished stone floor, his back hitting the base of a towering statue. He slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle, the action smooth despite the tremor of exhaustion in his hands. Above him, the air was thick with the whine of Vonari disruptors and the sharp cracks of Earth-issue ballistics. "Right flank!" he roared, his voice raw. Alira was already moving. She was a blur of black steel and silver skin, her ceremonial armor gone, replaced by the battle-scarred combat plate she had worn during the rebellion. Her cybernetic arm hummed with a lethal, high-pitched frequency as she deflected a volley of plasma bolts with an energy shield projected from her wrist. In her organic hand, she wielded a disruptor blade, a weapon of pure violet light. She cut through the smoke, meeting the first wave of Shadow Corps commandos. These were not soldiers. They were executioners, faceless in their black vacuum-sealed armor. They moved with mechanical precision, ignoring losses driven by the single directive ingrained in their neural uplinks. Terminate the hybrid. Alira met them with the fury of a mother and the skill of an empress. She sidestepped a vibro knife, her blade flashing in a violet arc that severed the attacker's arm. She spun, her cybernetic fist crushing the helmet of a second soldier. "They are breaching the inner sanctum," Alira shouted over the din. "Rex, the door!" Rex broke cover. He sprinted across the open nave, firing controlled bursts. His aim was true. 3 Shadow Corps soldiers dropped, their armor shattered by high-velocity tungsten. He reached the heavy blast doors that guarded the inner chamber where Kira was hiding. He slapped a magnetic mine onto the frame, not to open it, but to seal it. "Sealing charges armed!" he yelled. Before he could detonate it, the wall beside him exploded. Masonry and ancient glass rained down. Through the dust, a squad of Vonari Inquisitors emerged. They were huge, encased in crimson armor, wielding heavy pikes that crackled with electrical energy. Leading them was not a grunt, but a high-ranking commander, distinguishable by the gold crest on his helm. "Surrender the abomination!" the commander bellowed, his voice amplified. "By order of the High Council and the Terra Accord!" "Come and get her!" Rex snarled. He detonated the mine. The blast fused the door shut, buying them minutes, maybe seconds. He turned to face the Inquisitors, raising his rifle, but he was out of ammunition. The weapon clicked dry. He tossed the rifle aside and drew his combat knife, a jagged piece of earth steel that looked pitiful against the Inquisitor pikes. Alira landed beside him. She was breathing hard, violet blood smearing her cheek. "Together?" "Always," Rex said. They moved as one. Rex went low, sliding under the swing of a pike, driving his knife into the unarmored joint of an Inquisitor's knee. The alien roared and fell. Alira went high, using the fallen Inquisitor as a springboard, launching herself at the commander. Her blade clashed against his pike, a shower of sparks illuminating the desperate, sweating faces of the combatants. It was a massacre. There were too many of them. For every soldier they fell, 2 more stepped through the breach. The Shadow Corps and the Inquisitors, ancient enemies, fought side by side with a terrifying, unified efficiency. They were united by fear. Fear of the girl behind the door. Fear of the change she represented. A heavy blow from a rifle butt caught Rex in the ribs, sending him sprawling. He gasped, tasting blood. An inquisitor loomed over him, raising a pike for the killing blow. Illyra screamed, abandoning her duel to throw herself in the path of the weapon. The pike struck her cybernetic shoulder, shearing through servos and metal. She collapsed, her arm useless, sparking wildly. "No!" Rex scrambled toward her, covering her body with his own. The Inquisitor commander stepped forward, raising a heavy disruptor pistol. Behind him, the fused door to the inner sanctum began to glow red. The Shadow Corps were cutting through. "It ends here," the commander said, leveling the gun at Rex's head. "The anomaly dies. Order is restored." The blast door did not melt. It blew outward. It was not an explosion of fire. It was an explosion of silence. Kira stood in the ruin of the doorway. She was small, trembling, wearing a tunic that was too big for her. Tears streamed down her dust-streaked face, but her eyes were not weeping. They were burning. They were two miniature stars, white and terrible, pouring light into the smoky cathedral. She saw Rex, bloody and beaten. She saw Illyra, her metal arm severed, clutching Rex's coat. The terror in the girl's face vanished, replaced by a sorrow so deep it felt ancient. "Stop," she whispered. The word was not spoken. It felt, it vibrated in the marrow of every bone, in the core of every weapon, in the hull of every ship orbiting outside. Kira threw her arms wide. A shockwave of golden energy erupted from her small body. It moved slower than light, rolling across the sanctuary like a tidal wave of liquid amber. It passed over Rex and Illyra, warm and harmless. But when it hit the Inquisitors and the Shadow Corps, it did not burn them. It slammed into them with the weight of a collapsing star. Weapons flew from hands as if magnetized, heavy armor locked up, servos freezing instantly. Soldiers were lifted off their feet and pinned against the walls by an invisible, crushing gravity. The Inquisitor commander dropped his gun, clutching his head as the psychic weight of the wave overwhelmed his neural pathways. The wave expanded, punching through the temple roof, flaring out into the void. Outside, the sensors of the blockade fleet went white, engines cut out. The battle did not just stop, it was suspended inside the temple. The silence was absolute. Dust motes hung in the air, frozen in the golden field. The only sound was Kira's ragged breathing. She lowered her arms. The golden light faded, leaving a heavy, pressurized stillness. The soldiers slumped to the ground, conscious but unable to move, stripped of their will to fight. Kira looked at her hands, shaking violently, then looked at her parents. She stumbled. Illyra forced herself up. She ignored the sparks raining from her severed shoulder. She ignored the pain. She walked past the paralyzed Inquisitors, past the stunned Shadow Corps commandos. She went to her daughter, but she did not pick her up. Not yet. Illyra turned to face the room. She stood tall, her silver hair wild, her black eyes blazing with a ferocity that made the armed men on the floor flinch. "Look at her!" Illyra's voice rang out, amplified by the acoustics of the temple. "Look at the monster you came to kill!" She gestured to the small, terrified girl who was now hiding behind Rex's legs. "She is not a weapon." Illyra screamed, the tears finally spilling over. "She is a child. She is my blood, and she is his." She pointed at Rex, who was standing again, his knife still in hand, ready to die before anyone took a step closer. Illyra walked to the Inquisitor commander, who was struggling to his knees. She recognized him now. General Hrol, a hero of the Vonari Old Guard, a man who had once taught her strategy in the war rooms of the palace. "General Hrol," Illyra said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You served my father. You hold honor above all else. Is there honor in this? In slaughtering a child because you are afraid of the shape of her ears? Hrol looked up. His helmet had been torn off by the shockwave. His reptilian face was gray with shock. He looked at the girl. He saw the fear in her eyes. He saw the way she clung to the human's leg, and he saw the raw, undeniable power she had just used not to kill them, which she easily could have done, but to stop them. Hrol coughed, purple blood splattering his chest. He had been wounded in the initial breach. A piece of shrapnel lodged in his side. He was dying. The prophecy, Hrol wheezed. The old texts speak of a bridge, a being of two worlds. She is the bridge, Illyra declared, her voice echoing. She is the heir to the Vonari throne, and she is a daughter of Earth. She is proof that we do not have to destroy each other. Hrol looked at Rex. He looked at the human soldier standing over the Vonari Empress, not as a captor, but as a partner, a protector. Peace, Hrol whispered. Life was fading from his eyes. We thought it was a weakness. We thought purity was strength. He slumped forward, his hand reaching out, almost touching Kira's foot. The galaxy is not ready. My Empress, they will try to kill her. They will always be afraid. Then let them come, Illyra said, looking up at the frozen soldiers, at the cameras on their helmets that were broadcasting this moment to the fleet above. Let them come, and we will show them what family looks like. Hrol let out a long, rattling breath, and then he was still. The silence held. The Shadow Corps commandos slowly lowered their weapons. The Inquisitors looked at their dead general, then at their Empress. One by one, they deactivated their pikes. They did not bow. They did not cheer. But they did not fire. The will to fight had been broken, not by force, but by the undeniable truth standing in front of them. Rex holstered his knife. He turned to Kira. She was swaying, her eyes rolling back. The energy expenditure had drained her. She collapsed forward. Rex caught her before she hit the ground. He scooped her up, cradling her against his chest, shielding her face from the carnage of the room. She was so light, so small. He walked over to Illyra. She was trembling, the adrenaline fading, leaving only the shock and the pain of her injuries. Rex looked at her. He saw the woman who had defied an empire. He saw the mother who had walked through fire. She's asleep, Rex said softly. Illyra looked at the bundle in his arms. She reached out with her remaining hand, brushing the hair from Kira's forehead. Her face crumpled. The Empress vanished, and the mother returned. I thought she had died, Illyra sobbed, the words tearing out of her throat. For 10 years. I thought she had died. Rex pulled them both closer, forming a shield around them in the middle of the ruined temple. He looked at Illyra, his eyes fierce and tender. She kept calling for her mother, Rex replied, his voice thick with the memory of the cold ruins on Caro 7. I couldn't let her die alone. Illyra rested her forehead against his chest, weeping openly. Rex held them, the three of them standing in the wreckage of the war they had ended, and the beginning of the peace they had to build. 6 months later, the summit of the Twin Suns was held on the neutral moon of Ethelgard. It was a massive glass-domed structure built specifically for this day. Outside, the sky was a brilliant tapestry of violet and orange, illuminated by the binary star system that sat on the border of Vonari and Earth space. The security was unprecedented. A joint fleet of Earth Federation cruisers and Vonari war spheroids patrolled the orbit, not facing each other, but facing outward, guarding the proceedings. Inside the dome, The atmosphere was electric. Delegates from 100 worlds filled the amphitheater. There were the Terran senators in their gray suits, the Vonari High Lords in their crimson robes, and the representatives of the fringe worlds, the smugglers and the miners who had been caught in the crossfire for too long. They went silent as the heavy doors opened. Commander Rex Varn walked in first. He wore a dress uniform that had no rank insignia, only the simple, unadorned gray of a free citizen. He walked with a slight limp, a reminder of the sanctuary battle, but his head was high. He scanned the room with the eyes of a veteran, checking every shadow, every face. Beside him walked Empress Illyra Vaughn. She wore white, not the black of mourning, but the white of rebirth. Her cybernetic arm had been replaced with a new, sleeker model of polished platinum and white ceramic. She did not wear a crown. And between them, holding both their hands, walked Kira. She wore a simple tunic of blue silk. She looked at the crowd of thousands, at the cameras that were beaming her image to trillions. She did not hide. She did not look down. They reached the podium. Illyra stepped forward. She did not speak of treaties or trade routes. She spoke of a mining moon. She spoke of a fortress. She spoke of a soldier who saved a child that wasn't his, and a mother who tore down her own throne to get her back. Rex stood beside her, his hand resting on Kira's shoulder. He saw the faces in the crowd. Some were still hostile. Some were afraid. But many, more than he expected, were looking at Kira with something else. Wonder. When the speeches were done, and the first unstable, fragile accords of the new alliance were signed, the formalities dissolved. Rex and Illyra slipped away before the reception began. They took a private lift to the upper gardens of the dome, a sanctuary of earth flora and Vonari crystal trees. It was quiet here. The hum of the ventilation and the distant murmur of the crowd were the only sounds. Rex sat on a stone bench, unbuttoning the stiff collar of his jacket. He looked tired. The old deep bone weariness was still there, but the shaking in his hands was gone. Illyra sat beside him. She leaned her head on his shoulder, her platinum arm resting comfortably on his knee. "We survived," she said softly. "For now," Rex corrected, though there was a smile in his voice. "Kroll was right. There will always be someone trying to take a shot." "Let them," Illyra said, closing her eyes. "I have my general, and I have my queen," Rex murmured, kissing the top of her head. They looked out across the garden. Kira was running through the long grass. She was chasing a bioluminescent butterfly, laughing as it dipped and weaved between the trees. She tripped, tumbled into the grass, and rolled over, giggling. She sat up, bathed in the light of the two suns setting on the horizon, one yellow, one violet. The light blended around her, creating a halo of perfect, impossible color. She looked back at them. She waved. Rex raised his hand and waved back. Illyra smiled, a true unburdened smile that erased the years of ice and scars. They were battered. They were hunted. They carried the weight of two civilizations on their backs. But as they watched their daughter play in the light of a new day, Rex and Illyra knew the truth. They were finally whole.